Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. I'm really glad you're here today because we are diving into a truly fascinating story. We're going to explore the life of a figure who basically defined the early history of the United States. But we're not just going to talk about the battles he won or the fancy titles he held. Instead, we're focusing on the core theme of his entire life. It's the story of a leader defined not by the power he seized, but by the ultimate power he willingly surrendered.
To really get a sense of who he was, we're drawing straight from first-person historical perspectives today. Imagine stepping into his shoes, hearing him simply say, "My name is George Washington." We're going to strip away the giant monuments and all that mythology to look at the raw human experience of a guy who started out as just a young boy growing up in colonial Virginia.
And long before he ever led an army or guided a brand new nation, his whole worldview was built on one very simple foundation. He truly believed that character, honesty, and courage mattered infinitely more than wealth or political power. And as you'll see, that belief was going to be tested over and over again.
Okay, let's dive into this and map out the major milestones we're going to cover. We've got his birth in Virginia in 1732, settling down at Mount Vernon in 1759, taking command of the Continental Army in 1775, his inauguration as the first president in 1789, right up to his passing in 1799.
Section 1. The Making of a Leader. Lessons from the Wilderness.
So Washington wasn't exactly born into this untouchable, massive wealth, like some people assume. When he was just 11 years old, his father passed away. That literally flipped his world upside down. While a lot of his elite peers were being shipped off to England for these prestigious formal educations, young George had to stay in Virginia. He had to grow up fast and carve out his own path through sheer grit.
Because of that, he turned to really practical pursuits. We're talking mathematics, land surveying, and literally navigating the untamed wilderness instead of sitting in some cozy classroom. Those long, exhausting trips through dense forests taught him fierce discipline, spatial awareness, and a kind of quiet patience that eventually became the absolute bedrock of his leadership.
Then came the French and Indian War, and he was thrown right into the heat of combat. He joined the Virginia militia, and, frankly, he saw some terrible things. He even made some pretty painful tactical mistakes early on. But the wilderness had taught him to be tough. He survived brutal battles where bullets literally tore right through his uniform, yet he walked away completely unharmed. People thought it was miraculous. But for him, it forged this understanding that true courage is just making the decision to keep moving forward, even when you are overwhelmingly terrified.
After experiencing the brutal reality of war, his priorities totally shifted. By 1759, he was completely over it. He married a wealthy widow named Martha Custis, and he desperately just wanted a quiet, peaceful life. They settled at his beloved estate, Mount Vernon, and even though they didn't have biological children of their own, he stepped right up and lovingly raised Martha's 2 kids. He loved managing his farm, he loved the quiet, and he honestly thought the rest of his life was just going to be peaceful.
Section 2. The Revolutionary Commander. The Burden of Leadership.
Well, history had other plans. In 1775, he's ripped away from his beloved farm to command the Continental Army. And the task in front of him? It looks absolutely impossible. Just think about Valley Forge. Freezing temperatures, literally no food, soldiers marching without shoes, and disease spreading everywhere. The true burden of leadership fell entirely on his shoulders. Keeping the revolution alive wasn't just about military tactics anymore, it required his men to have this fierce, undeniable loyalty to him, even in the face of absolute misery.
And somehow, that loyalty, that unimaginable level of sacrifice, it actually paid off. After years of what felt like endless, exhausting struggle, they pulled off a monumental victory. In 1781, they finally defeated the British at Yorktown. Against all odds, the crazy dream of an independent America was suddenly a reality.
Section 3. The First American President. Establishing a Nation.
But here's the thing. Winning the war was really just the opening act. The real challenge was taking the chaotic ashes of a revolution and building a stable, functioning nation. Now, what's really interesting about this moment is how his character was tested. It was genuinely suggested to him that he should become a king, but he immediately and firmly refused. They had just bled to escape a monarchy. He knew for sure that America needed democracy. The power had to rest with the people, absolutely not a crown.
So when he was inaugurated in 1789 as our first president, he was carrying an unbelievably heavy weight, the weight of precedent. Because the office of the presidency had never existed before, he knew that every single move he made, every decision, would set a permanent, sacred example for all the generations of leaders that would follow him.
Let's look at his core philosophies while in office. He passionately believed this fragile new nation had to avoid unnecessary foreign wars. He was constantly urging citizens to stay united, and he explicitly warned against the incredible danger of extreme political divisions. On top of that, he wanted to build a strong federal government, but one that still fiercely protected individual freedoms. It's actually amazing to think about because those same ideals form the foundation of how our modern democratic traditions operate today.
Section 4. A legacy of service, the ultimate sacrifice of power. As his second term wrapped up, Washington made a decision that pretty much shocked the entire world. He voluntarily stepped down. He just walked away from the highest seat of power on earth to prove a very specific point. In a land of liberty, no leader should rule forever. Relinquishing that control so willingly is what ensured the peaceful transfer of power, which is arguably America's most defining democratic tradition.
After all that, he finally got to go back to Mount Vernon. He just wanted to spend whatever years he had left quietly farming and hanging out with his family. But sadly, his time there was really cut short. In December of 1799, he fell seriously ill. His health dropped rapidly, and he passed away. He was only 67 years old.
His final words were just incredibly simple. "'Tis well." It was this quiet, humble ending for a guy whose life was never actually about chasing fame. His whole existence was centered on duty, absolute integrity, and just serving his country. He always tried to put the nation way above his own ego. And that brings us to the end of our explainer today. But before you go, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on. When we look back at Washington's story, a story that is literally defined by his willingness to surrender ultimate authority, we really have to ask ourselves something. In an era that so often just ruthlessly chases power, how do we measure the true value of a leader who purposefully chooses to walk away? Think on that for a bit. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time as we keep exploring the fascinating stories that shape our world.